Santa Barbara County Association of Governments meeting for June 17th. Order. If I could get a roll call, please.
Got me all confused there. Director Williams,
Here.
Hart,
Here.
Hartman,
Here.
Nelson, Lavanino, Urig,
Here.
Julian,
Here.
Osborne,
Here.
Patino,
Here.
Perotti,
Here.
Clark. I see you, Al. You're muted. That's okay. Maria
Here.
and Chair Sierra.
Here. Thank you very much. All righty. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's June 17th SBCAG board meeting. For the record, my name is Holly Sierra and I'm the chair of the SBCAG board. If I could ask the clerk to remind participants of remote participation housekeeping before proceeding.
Thank you, Chair Sierra. Just a couple of Zoom reminders. For all the panelists, please remember to mute your mic when you're not speaking. If you'd like to comment, please use the raise your hand button. If you're an attendee, you will be in listen-only mode. All attendees will remain in listen-only mode unless unmuted by SBCAG staff to provide public comment. Comments from the public are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The public will not be able to share their video or screen. When public comment is called on for an agenda item, attendees may use the raise your hand button to express desire to provide public comment for that item, and you'll be unmuted when it is your turn. Those calling in on the phone can dial *9 to raise your hand. Thank you, and those conclude my Zoom reminders.
Thank you very much, Terry. If everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. All righty. Excuse me. Is there any public comment? Or has any public comment been provided in advance for this item?
Chair, we received no general public comment requests, and I see no attendees wishing to speak.
All righty. Thank you very much. Item 4 is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any directors who'd like to pull any items from the consent calendar? Hearing nobody, seeing no finger, no little wavy hands. Is there any public comment?
Chair Sierra, yes, we have one public comment on item 4B, which I'll read into the record first before Mr. Tom Becker makes his comment. Item 4B, Regional Housing Needs Allocation Draft Plan. Approve release of the draft RENA plan for public review, leading to a public hearing and consideration of adoption of the final plan during the July 15th, 2021 meeting. And we have Mr. Tom Becker who would like to speak.
Certainly, Mr. Becker, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. A couple points I'd like to make on this item. Number one, the RENA allocation for South County has been acknowledged that it will increase congestion in South County, a significant amount. It will increase vehicle miles traveled and congestion in South County. Number two, the housing allocation in South County will be taken mostly by people who really are going to be coming in from outside Santa Barbara County and from Ventura County. They're going to be those housing units will be occupied by people coming in from Los Angeles County or coming in even from out of state. So it's not really going to accomplish what the primary task is to provide housing for people who are already here. That housing is there's no restriction on it. You haven't put any restrictions on the housing being allocated only to people in Santa Barbara or Ventura County. It's for anybody who wants to come in and take that. The vast majority of housing units in the RENA plan will be rental housing, not for home ownership or ownership, but for rental. There's already a significant problem with people renting there shoveling all their money over to a landlord and having nothing left after paying rent. Homeownership is very important. And number four, the item number four, or point number four, is that the RENA allocation will increase the disparity in homeownership rates between the white population and the Hispanic and people of color. Right now in South County, it's like, if you own a single family home, it's like 80% white people owning single family homes. This is going to make that disparity worse. It should be equal. If 50% of the population is white, should be 50% of single family home ownership. If 45% is Hispanic, 45% of single family home ownership should be Hispanic. If it's 5% Asian and Black, it should be that percentage. This is going to make it worse. And I just wanted to point that out. And you people have done nothing to address these problems, even though you've known it for a long time. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Becker, thank you very much. Are there any other public comments?
Chair Sierra, we received no other public comments.
All
We
right.
did actually, I take that back. We did receive two from Mr. Becker, but that was yesterday and they were distributed to the board and he did not require that we read them into the record.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Is there any board discussion? I'm looking for the
Madam
little-
Chair, this is Rachel.
Yes.
This is Rachel Van Mullum. I just need to make a quick announcement on item 4K. But
Okay.
Before we do that, I just want to take this opportunity to introduce Deputy County Counsel Susan Mckenzie, who's here at the table with me. As I transition to County Counsel on June 28th, Ms. Mckenzie is going to become the primary attorney for SBCAG. She's been with the county since 2015, and among other things, is an expert in all things contracting. She joined us before she was at the United States Navy as a contract specialist. And she's been my partner on SBCAG for the last 4 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mckenzie for the announcement.
Thank you. Was Ms. Mckenzie going to say anything?
Rachel, is Susan going to say something?
Yes, we're just having a little trouble with the microphone.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. And Madam Chair and Directors, I'm excited to take on this new role with SBCAG. And moving then to item 4K, the Brown Act requires that prior to taking final action in an open meeting, that the legislative body receive a summary on the recommended salary or benefits package of the local agency executive. And so I'd just like the record to reflect that this reading of item 4K constitutes the required report under the government code. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mckenzie. Thank you, Susan. Okay. Is there any board discussion or do we have a motion?
So move, Julian.
Thank you.
Approve.
I'll second that.
All righty. Thank you very much. We've had a motion and a second. Clerk?
Director Williams?
I didn't have my mic on. Oh, or we have to do a roll call.
Yes.
Sorry. Aye.
Thank you. Director Hart?
Aye.
Director Hartman?
Aye.
Director Nelson? Director Urig?
Aye.
Director Julian?
Aye.
Director Osborne?
Aye.
Director Patino?
Aye.
Director Perotti?
Aye.
Director Clark?
Aye.
Director Murillo?
Aye.
And Chair Sierra.
Aye.
And motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. All righty. If you could please read item 5 into the record.
Thank you. Item 5, Connected 2050 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy and Draft Program Environmental Impact Report. Conduct a public hearing to accept comments on the draft Connected 2050 RTP, SCS, and associated draft program environmental impact report.
Thank you very much. I am opening the public hearing, and I believe we have a presentation by Michael Becker and Andrew Orfila.
All right.
Gentlemen?
So hopefully that's better. Good morning, Chair Sierra and directors. This morning we're here to conduct one of two required public hearings leading to the adoption of the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. The second hearing will be conducted prior to seeking adoption of the Connected 2050 during your August meeting. And before we get started, I want to just go through three acronyms that I don't know if I can control myself not using them, so let's best get them out of the way. First is RTP, which is Regional Transportation Plan. Second is SCS, Sustainable Community Strategy. They're frequently referred to as RTP SCS since they are contained in one document. And the final is one that you're likely more familiar with, is EIR for Environmental Impact Report. So in addition for conducting the public hearing on the Regional Transportation Plan, we were also including the draft EIR, which was prepared for the RTP, and we'll accept comments on that document as well. So the sequence of events for today's item will be, I'll present the Connected 2050. Andrew Orfila is here. He can provide some assistance related to anything data or modeling with the Regional Transportation Plan. We'll switch to Eric Von Berg of Rincon Consultants, who will present on the draft EIR, and I will conclude, and then we can accept public comment and board comment. So keep it on that slide, please. So the slide that's on the screen just provides an overview of what will be discussed, and essentially we will be walking you through the highlights of Connected 2050, the draft Regional Transportation Plan, as well as the draft environmental document. Okay, next slide. So before we get into Connected 2050 specifically, let me touch on the roles of the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy more in general. The RTP is the core of SBCAG's planning. It's the guiding document that all of our other work supports. It's a requirement of our funding agencies, and every metropolitan planning organization, or MPO in the nation, prepares an RTP, though they may call it something different, but essentially it's a long-range transportation plan. The RTP is required to look at a minimum of 20 years. Our current plan, which was adopted in 2017, fast forward 2040, looked at the 2040. In this cycle, we've extended that out to 2050 with Connected 2050. And if you boil it down to its core, there's two things that the Regional Transportation Plan does, or two big things, I'd say. First is it forecasts available transportation revenues out through the horizon of the plan. And secondly, it identifies how we, as a region, will invest those transportation revenues in the transportation network. And since the passage of SB 375 in 2008, the Regional Transportation Plan has been required to include what's called a Sustainable Community Strategy, which I'll get into a little more detail in a second. And finally, we update this plan every 4 years. Fast forward 2040, the current plan was adopted in August 2017, and we will be bringing Connected 2050 to you for your consideration in August. Following adoption of the plan, we have about 2 years before we roll up our sleeves and get into the next one. Next slide, Andrew. So the Sustainable Community Strategy is the aspect of the state's quest to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that is applicable to us. In 2006, then Governor Schwarzenegger signed AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act, which called for greenhouse gas reductions across all sectors of the economy. SB 375 was passed in 2008 to implement one aspect of the broader AB 32. SB 375 focuses on greenhouse gas emissions from light-duty vehicles. I was trying to figure out how to explain what classifies as a light-duty vehicle, but I think if you can drive it with your normal driver's license, it's a light-duty vehicle. The law tasks us, being the region, in identifying a way to reduce greenhouse gases or gas emissions by considering both investments in the transportation network and land use development patterns, essentially defined a combination of land use development patterns and transportation investments that in the end reduces greenhouse gas emissions from light duty vehicles. And it is important to note that No jurisdiction is required to plan consistently with the Sustainable Community Strategy. Connected 2050 represents SBCAG's third regional transportation plan, which will include a sustainable community strategy. Next slide. The development of a regional transportation plan takes about 2 years, though in reality it never stops. For instance, immediately after adopting Fast Forward 2040, we started the process of updating our regional growth forecast, which was a necessary component of the regional transportation plan. And then the overall work program that you adopted in April, it calls for us to upgrade our land use modeling capabilities and to transition the way that we organize and catalog our transportation projects, both which will feed into the next regional transportation plan. So this slide provides a high-level overview of the process. And let me preface it a bit. Each time that we update the regional transportation plan, we start with the current plan. And since the passage of SB 375, and this being the third RTP since then, there have been no drastic changes to the plan. Measure A defines much of our transportation investment, and we've come to learn that there aren't many ways to change the sustainable community strategy if we aim to satisfy the greenhouse gas reduction targets. With that said, and starting with the beginning of the process, we review our goals, objectives, policies, and performance measures, bring them to the advisory committee to see if anything needs updated. And the same goes for transportation projects, alternative scenarios, and so on. And while we're also engaging with the advisory committee, we also conduct a public process. And if you recall, we took a little bit different approach with the public process in this cycle. We hired the Community Environmental Council to assist us. And while COVID could not have hit at a worse time, we were successful in engaging a better cross-section of the community. Following the initial public process, we conducted 2 public hearings. And then we have, the board selected the preferred scenario last November, which enabled us to start drafting the plan as well to start the environmental review. Now we are conducting the 2 required public hearings, which will eventually lead to your consideration for adopting the plan, which is scheduled to occur in August. Next slide, please. This slide just provides a broad overview of the public process. In the first phase, where we employed the Community Environmental Council, we sought to engage as many people as possible in a more informal manner. The second phase involved 2 public workshops, both conducted virtually due to the pandemic. And finally, we conducted 2 public hearings, or the first being today and the next being in August. And a quick note on the impact of COVID, because it was both a detriment to the process as well being beneficial to the process. When we hired the Community Environmental Council, we worked with them to develop their engagement plan, all the materials for the process, and just as it was about to be executed is when everybody got sent home. So what was envisioned to be a lot of face-to-face community engagement quickly turned into phone calls and online engagement. So that was the detriment. For the benefit, for the public workshops, the impact of COVID greatly increased participation. When conducted virtually, the barrier of participation is lower, and the attendance we had or participation in the process proved that. In the prior cycle, we only had about 10 to 15 people turn out for the 2 public workshops, and do recognize that I think it's the closer something is to your home or to an area of interest, and the closer in time frame, the more involved you will be. So if somebody wants to build something next door to you, you're going to pay attention. If somebody wants to build something on the other side of the county in 30 years, it's hard to be engaged. So it's difficult to turn people out for this. So we went from 10 to 15 people in the prior cycle to about 150 this time around. So that was great. The first appendix of the appendices document details the public process. Next slide. And now a summary on Connected 2050. First, there are no surprises here. This plan continues what was started with the 2013 Regional Transportation Plan and continued with the 2017 plan. Our transportation projects revolve around Measure A. Measure A accounts for much of our spending. The sustainable community strategy aspect focuses on addressing the region's jobs housing imbalance and is consistent with the RENA process. The Joint Technical Advisory Committee is the plan's advisory committee, also referred to as JTAC. It's comprised of planning and public works representatives from each of the region's jurisdictions, as well as APCD, MTD, and Caltrans. And despite the challenges of COVID, we did manage to have an effective public process. And finally, this plan does meet the requirements imposed on us by our state and federal partners. Next slide. The plan is built around 5 goals. These goals remain unchanged going back to the 2013 plan and align with the state's smart mobility framework. The goals focus on the environment, mobility, equity, health and safety, and the economy. Next slide, please. As I mentioned early on, a key component of the regional transportation plan is the forecast of available transportation revenues through the planning horizon, 2050 in our case. You can see for the 30 years, 2020 to 2050, we expect to have approximately $11.3 billion available. The pie chart shows where the revenue is coming from broadly. 14% of the revenue comes from Measure A and a replacement measure that you directed us to assume. 21% from SB1 programs, and so on. Note that these funds have purposes ranging from the 101 HOV to repaving a rural road, essentially the whole gamut of transportation investment in the region. The slide shows the sources of funds, which can largely be consistent with the mode split for the projects. However, there is a lot of cross-pollination in the funds. If you were to focus on the projects, roughly 3.2% of the funding is dedicated or allocated towards bicycle pedestrian projects, 21% for transit projects, and 75.8% for auto-oriented projects. But do note that this is not a clean breakdown, and I think it's probably impossible to get the number that's 100% accurate. For instance, many road projects include bicycle and pedestrian improvements. In addition, some of the funding sources are based on assumptions related to the success of grant applications. And in addition, the bulk of the funding that is shown as allocated towards auto-oriented modes is simply for maintenance. Next slide. Last November, the board directed staff to develop a plan around the transit-oriented development strategy, which includes an enhanced transit strategy. The strategy selected is the same strategy that was included in both the 2013 and 2017 plans. And of the scenarios that we analyzed for this update, the selected scenario is the only one that meets the state's greenhouse gas reduction targets for target year 2035, which is minus 17% per capita compared to 2005 levels. The strategy, which I view as a two-pronged approach to closing the jobs housing imbalance. First, consistent with the RENA process, housing is allocated to align with the location of jobs. And in theory, that would cut down on long-distance commuting. The second aspect is to make some of the shorter trips happen by more sustainable modes, being transit, bike, or walk. The enhanced transit strategy, which is included as a component of this, says that any new transit funding capacity be used to improve the services in areas where growth is expected to occur as the demand dictates. Next slide. So this slide highlights some of the performance metrics. I will note that Andrew is here and he can answer questions related to these, but as the plan continues the strategies from the prior two plans, there are no surprises. The one that matters most to the state in regards to us satisfying the requirements of SB 375 is the bottom line. If implemented, this plan will result in a minus 17.8% per capita greenhouse gas emissions reduction from light-duty vehicles by 2035, which satisfies our requirements through SB 375. And next slide. So we're going to turn it over to Eric Von Berg. Eric is participating through Zoom, and he's going to walk you through the draft EIR, and then I will be back. Thanks.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Eric Von Berg with Rincon Consultants, and we prepared the draft EIR for SBCAG for this project. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this gives you the overview of the CEQA environmental review process and where the schedule is, so that we've gone through the process where we sent out what they call a notice of preparation, asking people what they wanted us to address in the EIR. We received 6 letters in regards to that. Those are included in the draft EIR and then addressed in the EIR. And then as well, now we had prepared the draft EIR and it's currently out for public notification. As you can see, that's where we're at right now with the deadline for comments, July 12th. And then after that, we will then review those comments with staff, address those comments individually, and then that'll become part of the final EIR that we'll then present back to you in the August meeting. So we can go to the next slide. So again, just as background, the purpose of CEQA is that it's the idea of reviewing a project to disclose significant environmental impacts, looking at ways to avoid or reduce those impacts, addressing maybe some alternatives that we could to alleviate those impacts or eliminate those impacts. And as well, I think overall, it's just a public disclosure document and information to provide to decision makers to make a full decision on what they're approving on a project. Next slide. So as can be seen here, these are the issues that we analyzed in the program EIR. And as reference, a program EIR is looking at, with this RTP and then as well the SES, we don't have a specific project that we can identify, specific impacts, where is the road going to be? What are the limits of that road? And so we can identify more specific impacts and mitigation measures for that. This is looking at the overall program that's here and making assumptions on certain impacts and overall with the whole program, what might occur there. So with that, let's go to the next slide. We identified 17 significant impacts with this project, and that was in taking a more conservative approach that if there wasn't, because we don't know the exact impacts of the specific projects within the RTP, it's hard to then develop mitigation measures to address those impacts. So if there was the potential for a significant impact, we identified it as a significant and unavoidable impact. And included with that would be, there was also identified cumulative impacts with each of these scenarios here, most of these scenarios. And also is in regards to this, SBCAG does not have the land use authority to tell the county or cities to implement specific mitigation measures since those local agencies have that land use authority. So in all these, we say that they can and should implement these measures, but overall, it's up to each of those individual organizations to decide that. And as well as they develop, and any of these projects that are listed here will have additional CEQA analysis required at the project level to then likely address these issues and make it so that they would not be a significant unavoidable impact. Next slide. So as well, another process that's required under CEQA is to look at alternatives to the project. The RTP SES selected that we studied is the preferred alternative, but as what's required under CEQA, then we have to look at what would be the alternative that would be then an environmentally superior project. And as we identified here, the alternative 2 would be that consider the environmentally superior project if as an alternative. Next slide. So what's next is that we'll finish the comment period. We'll review and respond to all those comments. Those become part of the final EIR, along with any edits that may be needed in the draft EIR based on those comments. And then we'll take it back to you for approval in August. So with that, happy to answer any questions. Or send it
Thank
back to Mike.
Yeah, if I could, just
Go ahead, Mr. Hecker.
Yeah, wrap it up real quick before we go to questions. I have 2 more slides, I believe. So here's the process of moving towards adoption, the remaining steps. We currently have 2 public comment periods open. For the regional transportation plan, the comment period is open and extends through July 28th. And the one for the EIR is open and extends through July 12th. Based on the comments we've received, we will make any edits that are needed. We'll return to our advisory committee one more time to present both to them and to seek a recommendation for adoption and certification from the committee to inform your decision. And finally, we'll be back here in August to conduct the second required public hearing and to seek adoption of the regional transportation plan and certification of the EIR. So next slide. So I wanted to touch on a few things. First, with the exception of the 101 HOV project, there's nothing significant in our region regards to adding capacity to the transportation network. And this requires us then to really rely on land use to meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. If we're not adding capacity with the exception of the 101, there's nothing that, it's very hard to find investments in the transportation network that will reduce to the level needed. Second, each time we go through this process, it gets harder and harder to meet those greenhouse gas reduction targets. And I just warn you, in the future, it may require more significant changes to sustainable community strategy. Every 4 years, we update the plan. We are four years closer to the targets, and 4 years have passed. And SBCAG, as Eric mentioned, has no land use authority, and land use is a necessary component to realizing the GHG reductions. Next, the Senate Bill 375, which is what requires us to do this, is in the process of being updated. And what that means, I think only time will tell. We're going to continue to monitor it and follow it. Next, we measure the plan's performance, including GHG reductions with a land use model and a travel model. And by the time we get to the next cycle, we will have a new version of both. While these should improve our capabilities, we are currently barely achieving the greenhouse gas reduction targets. And any differences in the modeling tools may make it more difficult. It may make it easier, I don't know, but it's one thing that we need to pay attention to and to recognize. And compared to the prior cycle, we opened up a new decade with this plan. The last 2 plans only went out to 2040. This time we're going out to 2050. So we added that decade 2040 to 2050. And SBCAG's planning efforts and the planning efforts of our jurisdictions largely don't go out to 2050. So with this plan, we're leaving $3.1 billion unallocated for in that period, 2040 to 2050. And I think I mentioned it to Margie, in the process, sometime between now and or after this plan's adopted and before we roll up our sleeves for the next one, we'll conduct some visioning sessions throughout the region to help identify what our long-term priorities are for that decade. But right now, we're leaving a lot of money unallocated. And finally, this plan was developed during the pandemic, as was a lot of things. But it is a testament that big things can be accomplished in a remote environment. It also creates a lot of uncertainty going forward for how the future of remote work will impact transportation and land use. These things will require us to monitor them over time. Finally, the pandemic arrived just as we were about to embark on a face-to-face public process, and that wasn't convenient. However, we definitely learned through this that if you lower the barrier to participation, more people will participate. Our public workshops had about 10 times the participation of prior ones. So I think regardless of how coming out of COVID shakes out, it's probably always worthwhile to have a virtual option. And next slide, which would just be the end. So that concludes the presentation. You have myself, Andrew, and Eric who can take questions or comments.
Thank you very much for the work put into this. Are there any questions of staff? I'm
Madam
not
Chair?
seeing. Yes.
I've just got just one. Number one, I'm been reading it as you've been speaking, trying to multitask, and this is chock full of really useful information, and I think important analysis and informing, our missions. And but I would just give a piece of comment while we're still in draft form. The language in 2.9 seems to it draws the nexus between housing and commuting, but it seems almost to sort of blame North County and Ventura for being more affordable than South County, instead of South County for not having either enough affordable housing. And it doesn't really draw the distinction between affordable housing, capital A affordable for low income, that we've actually been very successful at building in the South County, and workforce, which we have, with the exception of a few units that have gone online in Goleta, that we've totally failed at building in the South County. So that would be just my critique of the draft. It's great. I don't want to make the perfect the enemy the good, but while it's still in draft form, I would just make that public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Williams. Director
and I
Lurie,
think
do you have a?
In a
go
larger
ahead.
sense, I fully am committed to our work on the freeway, but you have to do this mental exercise and go, gosh, think about between the Muscle Shoals project, right, and the projects that we're doing now, how many people could we have housed for that amount of money, right? And so without thinking about planning, and that's what I think is so powerful about these kind of exercises that we're doing, and that and we have to think about planning as a deep part of this, because eventually we're going to run out for expansions on the freeway. We're going to run out of capacity, and we're not going to be able to do what we're doing right now again. And so we've got to solve this in the future by planning for better jobs housing balance, rather than throwing, my count, good $450 million at it, which is what I think we'll do between Muscle Shoals and our projects by the end of it.
All righty. Thank you very much, Director Williams. I've got Director Urick and then Director Perotti. Director
Thank
Urick?
you. And thank you, Chair Sierra. Just kind of piggybacking on what Director Williams was mentioning, I know, at least my recollections over the last 20 years in our San Ynez Valley, we have totally failed with workforce housing. And it's just one of those issues that doesn't ever seem to be brought up. It's always affordable or obtainable housing, as the new coined phrase would be right now. And workforce housing is really the primary driver of all of our gas house, our greenhouse, whatever that is, GHGs, that we're trying to actually prevent. And if that would be something that the board or whoever it is that is the driving force behind all of this, that we really need to focus a lot on our workforce housing to be able to provide for our residents that are there and the jobs that are in our particular cities. It just seems like that's kind of a common sense approach to eliminating or definitely reducing our GHG and the requirements that are needed for that. The other comment that really struck me is that right now SB 375 is being updated. And Mr. Becker, do you have any idea when that will be done? Because it seems to me, again, in some ways we're doing all of this work, and possibly with, maybe within the next 6 months or even a year, all of this could possibly change based on the update. And it I don't know, it just seems a little bit putting the cart before the horse in some ways, that we're having to, I understand we have to do an update every 4 years. And here I'm new at this. I'm just trying to listen in to what's all going on. But we have every 4 years we're supposed to update it. But if one of the laws that we're basing our updates on is possibly going to be changed, it seems like this should be maybe something we could possibly put on hold. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as a thought.
Yeah, Director,
Thank you.
Director Uhrig, there's 3 bills currently being considered that would potentially replace SB 375. And the fundamental reason why it needs replaced is it was approved or became law in 2008, and it had 2 target years for GHG reductions, 2020 and 2035. 2020 is already passed, and 2035 is quickly closing in on us. So I think the real purpose of an update is to extend the period out to 2050. So there'll be potentially interim targets of 2040 and 2050. So that's a big one. We can't put this on hold. It's a requirement that we adopted, and it's a requirement if that we have an adopted plan to receive transportation funds that the programming allocates to the projects in the region. But we do expect once we get into this next time, we'll be looking at an updated SB 375.
Thank you for that clarification.
All righty, we've got Director Perotti next, and then Director Clark.
Thank you, Chair Surya. Yes, first of all, Mr. Becker, thank you so much for the presentation. And Director Uhrig asked one of the questions that I was going to ask as well, as if there was a possibility of not doing this right now, but it sounds like we need to move forward. My other question was, and it's just a clarification, if I heard you correctly, you were saying, okay, you made the comment that this was a horrible time to start the plan during a pandemic, but that the workshops were held virtually. And if I heard you correctly, you said you had more participation when they were held virtually than when they were live, or do I have that? I have the number 150 written down, but then I have only 10 to 15. So how many actually participated in the workshops?
Director Perotti, in the workshops, the pandemic benefited the process because in the prior cycle, they were in person. We had one in Santa Barbara, one in Santa Maria, and 10 to 15 people total turned out. This time, we had 2 public workshops. They were conducted virtually, and we had about 150 people turn out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that it benefited the process.
That's interesting to know. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, Director Clark, and then Director Nelson. Al, you got to unmute.
How's that?
Perfect.
Thanks. I realize Carbon Ridge is just a little blip in the road, but it's our little blip. According to the UCSB economic forecast, Carpinteria has more people leaving Carpinteria to go to jobs outside of Carpinteria than we have people coming in. The city of Carpinteria has no long-range plans out to 2040 to increase employment in the area. Therefore, we find that the RENA program creates or exacerbates a jobs housing imbalance. And that's going to have the impacts in Carpinteria of increasing water demand, violating our land use plans, increasing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases, and potentially involving conversion of agriculture lands. So from our perspective, it seems like that the housing should be built where the jobs are, and that's Santa Barbara, Goleta, and Santa Barbara County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Clark. Director Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Chair Sierra. I want to first of all apologize for coming into the meeting late, and I came into the presentation partway through. So if I missed this portion of it, my apologies. But it seems that as we were looking at the job housing imbalance and the traffic patterns for people traveling for jobs, is this plan taking into full consideration kind of the maybe post-pandemic Zoom lifestyle that a lot of people are now working from home, and how much time do we need to fully integrate that into future plans? Because I definitely think we're seeing traffic patterns change. I know during the shutdown, we had absolute, the freeways were pretty clear. They seem to have returned to somewhat to normal, but I definitely think that we're seeing more and more people still take advantage of the work from home situation. And how will that fit with this plan moving forward?
Yeah, Director Nelson, very good question. That's one thing that we are going to have to watch over time, because our travel model that we use to assess performance, it's currently calibrated to base year 2015, which is prior to pandemic, and then we include the population and transportation population growth or disposition and the transportation investments in the model to assess. So the model itself does not consider what is going to happen. I will say we did use an off-model strategy this time, so to achieve the greenhouse gas reductions, you use your travel model with your land use model, and it gives you a number. And we were not quite there this time around. So we had to employ some off-model strategies, and one of them is to make some assumptions based on telecommute. So I believe Andrew can give me the correct numbers, but I believe it was, we assumed a percentage of the, a modest percentage of the overall percentage of people who had the ability to telecommute would telecommute on average, I believe, 2 days a week. So to that extent, we have considered it. However, I think we are still learning. There's a lot to be learned of what happens, and we really need to see what happens here. I don't know if remote work is going to eventually fade away. I hope not. Or if it's going to stick and grow potentially. But I see, I think SBCAG itself as an agency, we've kind of embraced part-time remote work. It seems the county has done the same. But I have friends in the private sector who their bosses are telling them to come back, and other ones who their bosses are telling them we don't need to see you anymore. So I think we're probably a year or two from knowing how this truly shakes out, but it's something that we must certainly have our eyes on going forward.
Yeah, so to whatever extent we can move forward with, the plan to have that in there somehow, just that caveat or maybe part of the executive report that we acknowledge that and really limit what kind of, actions that we take, not, acknowledging that we're using a broken model, not because, any staff members or any engineers broke the model, but the fact of the matter is it's a new world. You're hearing anecdotally what in SBCAG and with other county employees and people that you run into. Up here in the North County, I am running in, especially in the Orchid area, to a lot of people who are now relocating to our community from Orange and LA County because of their ability to have affordable housing in a great community and be able to work from home. We're having lawyers, we're having people in the finance sector, we're having psychologists, any people that can do teledoc. We're having a big influx now, and we've seen a significant jump in our home prices up here, which it makes it, again, unaffordable for workforce as we get those increased demands in there. But at the same time, we have more and more people in our community that are working from home. And I guess that's where it comes down to with a lot of this stuff is, we as policymakers and planners can do our best to try to imagine what the future might look like. But I think it's technology, innovation, and personal decisions and market forces that are really going to drive this. And, I think to the extent possible that we really need to encourage and allow those things to take effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to start a
ahead.
fight, but
Oh, come on.
but the world is not that new. Judging from the numbers, the Caltrans numbers that was just provided to us last week indicates that last year, when everybody was on lockdown, VMT only was 13% less. So we're not going to outperform that, right? We're going to be able to continue to get some of those folks to keep on telecommuting, but not all of them. So the world may be new, but not that new. And so we still have some of the basic challenges, and and the housing affordability one has only gotten worse, and how much that will increasingly frustrate our attempts to address jobs housing imbalance is intimidating. An 83% whatever growth in South County sales of homes in 1 year. That's to anybody who's young or brown is tantamount to the echo of exile. This is not all willing choices when people move. And the other Mr. Becker said it's for people in Ventura County or in North County. Half of those are people that until a few years ago lived here. And so I view a family that has been exiled to Oxnard or Ventura or Lompoc as very much a local person, especially if they've been continuing to live here this whole time. And part of our challenge of retaining those people as part of our community. And I think this document and the 357 goals underscore this need, unless we happen to have a couple more $1 billion and can take out acres of houses on either side of the freeway to keep on expanding it for another century, which I just don't think is feasible or a worthwhile strategy. If that's not our strategy, then housing has to be our strategy.
Thank you very much for your comments, your opinions. Director Clark, you had a question? You're muted still. And then Director Nelson.
And Madam Chair,
Okay.
Director Hart wants to get in too, please.
Got it. Thank you. Director Clark?
Thank you. In Carpinteria, many of the people that are going outside the community to work are working in Montecito as gardeners and maids, and working in hotels in Santa Barbara as well. Obviously, that's not everybody. That's a large part of the people that are leaving, and that they can't telecommute. They got to go to the job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Nelson, then Director Hart.
I just wanted to, I don't think argue with my colleague on the board about the job housing imbalance, but I think, we as the county and SBCAG and as well, we are one of the largest employers in the county. And so, when we can take the example and lead in some ways on energy efficiency and electric cars, we also should be considering seriously about moving more and more county infrastructure to the North County. Administrative offices. Right now we're talking about redesigning the Calle Real campus, which I think that's great for some things. But on the other hand, maybe we should really be considering, what can we do more in Santa Maria and Lompoc where the housing is more affordable. We are the largest employer in the county, and we have this huge opportunity to move more and more jobs up there, but that it's going to take a decision by all of us to do that. And I hope that that's what we're committing to moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Hart.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the interesting questions and comments from my colleagues. And when we're talking about models, I'm reminded by the phrase that is used in statistics a lot, that all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. And so I think in this instance, we're trying to cobble together the best information that we have with the data that we have. And there are a lot of anecdotal opinions about the future and even the present. One of the nice things we have available to us is the American Community Survey that looks at commute behavior on a very consistent, regular basis and gives us data that we can use to make informed decisions in time. And that'll help to concretize what's actually happening about telecommuting and local travel behavior and help us inform future strategies. But something Mr. Becker said early kind of caught my attention. And you mentioned that there isn't a strategy with transportation investments to reach our greenhouse gas emissions. You know, that the only project that we have that's on a large scale is the 101 freeway. But the 101 freeway is construction of a carpool lane, which is designed to shift behavior and to encourage people to carpool rather than driving single occupant vehicles. So that's a change of the existing environment that provides new infrastructure that is going to hopefully result in GHG emissions compared to the existing baseline. And then the rest of our strategy is investing in commuter rail. And that is another strategy that is scalable. And those two things together are lane and a train strategy. So no one's talking about widening the freeway anymore. We're talking about implementing the vision that fits with greenhouse gas reductions, fits with SB 375 goals, is a sustainable long-term strategy. But, separate from that, there is the land use strategy, which is really important. But I do think I need to ask about the scale of that. If we're talking about a built environment with 450,000 people, and we're looking out over time and saying how much, and if all the future growth was done correctly and more dense and in the right place and reduced commute trips and things like that, how much growth would be necessary to meet the greenhouse gas reduction strategies? And is that a realistic thing, looking back historically in our county? Or are we just in a rural place in relation to the rest of the state of California, and our future is different than it is going to be in the densely populated urban areas in terms of a statewide strategy to reduce growth? Because the biggest driver from the transportation side locally will be the electrification of vehicle fleets that is not outside of this process and isn't captured as a trend. And ultimately, as the electrical generating capacity of the state of California shifts to renewable sources, the electrification of the fleet becomes even that much more advantageous from a GHG standpoint. So isn't there a path in this that achieves the greenhouse gas reduction goals that we want to achieve as a society and a state in a different way in counties like Santa Barbara than it would be the case in urban counties? And is there any reflection of that in the discussion at the state level about reforms to this legislation?
Director Hart, I could answer some of that. So first, our planning assumptions all follow the regional growth forecast. So out to 2050, we consider just the demographic changes that align with that. And it's a pretty modest, I believe, about 1% per year growth. So we're not saying, and that enables us to achieve the GHG reductions, just working in that constraint of 1% a year growth and kind of aligning housing with jobs going forward. AB 32 was the umbrella. SB 375 is just one small aspect of that. We can't take credit for electrification of the vehicle fleet. That's taken credit for by somebody else under the AB 32 umbrella. It's not us. So, how a vehicle is fueled is irrelevant to us achieving our SB 375 targets. So, it is an interesting question. I think we had talked internally about, and I think at the urging of Supervisor Hartman, of looking at a housing assessment region-wide, something outside the constraints of the RENA process, and potentially some of those questions of how much growth would actually have to occur to truly accommodate your workforce. Those are questions we could potentially answer in the future, but otherwise, all I could say is we base our assumptions off the regional growth forecast.
I think that that speaks to perhaps there's a place in this document where you might roll up those bigger issues and explain how this is only one piece of a larger pie. I think somebody who's reading this document and looking at it just from this might be might misunderstand the bigger picture and how we're going to achieve greenhouse gas reductions through other strategies like electrification of vehicles than just what we're doing here to meet this requirement for state law.
We could do that.
All righty, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to go on to public comment. I do believe we have public comment. Terry?
Yes, thank you, Chair Sierra. We have Mr. Tom Becker who'd like to make public comment.
Mr. Becker, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I got a lot to say in 3 minutes.
Okay,
One,
speak fast.
Responding to Supervisor Williams' comment about the 101 freeway, the money could have been spent on housing. Well, Supervisor, segments 4D and 4E have not yet received their coastal development permits, and they don't have to be built. That segment does not have to be built. That'll save $300 million. You can support my request that they study an alternative to building 4D and 4E when those CDPs come up. Supervisor Williams, people left Santa Barbara to go to Oxnard or Ventura because that's where they could afford to buy a single family home. That's my whole point. People want to own detached single family homes, regardless of their race or skin color. Supervisor Hart, carpools increase vehicle miles traveled. That is in the handbooks that you have from Caltrans and others about that. And Supervisor Hart, the electrification of the fleet is an unproven theory. And Air Resources Board is being sued for pushing an unproven theory. EIRs are to study impacts of projects. I'm just referring you now to my comments on RENA, my previous comments about RENA. I have another question for staff. How can staff respond to complex comments received by them from the public between July 12th and the August meeting? You would have 1 month to respond to extremely complex technical and scientific evaluations. How are you going to do that in a month? Personally, I am going to submit at least a 100-page complex comment to you on or before July 12th, including requests of study of the spread of contagious disease in the Hispanic population and high-density infill projects. How are you going to conduct a proper analysis of that in a month, Mike? The Air Resources Board rejected the South Coast Association of Governments, SCS and RTB, because they told the South Coast, hey, that you have to actually prove that your projects will work or that your theories will work. You just can't go out into a handbook and show them. You have to actually show where it's worked. And I'm going to hold you to those standards. At the last May meeting of the Air Resources Board, the commission admitted that SB 375 and SCS have failed. And finally, this is the most worrisome thing that I have. Your consultant for this thing stated that a study of the spread of communicable disease in the Hispanic population and high-density infill projects is not a concern to you as part of this EIR. Well, EIRs are supposed to study impacts of your projects. Isn't the spread of a communicable disease among the Hispanic and other populations, shouldn't that be studied in an EIR? Don't you have any concern about that at all? Because your consultant doesn't. He's completely rejected that. It should be included. It should be included. And you shouldn't hold yourself to a timeline of having all this wrapped up in August. It should be your draft or your final EIR should take the time it's needed to look and study these extremely complex technical and scientific issues.
Mr. Becker?
3 to 4 months.
Mr. Becker, you have covered a lot of questions and a lot of comment in about 3.5 minutes, and we do appreciate your input. Thank you. Thank you very much. No other public comment?
Chair Sierra, we have no other public comment.
Okay. Is there any further board discussion? I don't see anybody. My only comment is that I truly hope that this report is shared with the county and each of the cities. You know, the land use, SBCAG doesn't have control over the cities and county does. And I think it's really important that they all have a chance to really study this as well before it gets adopted. So with that, I am closing the public hearing for this agenda item. This is a review and comment only, so we don't need a motion or action. Madam Clerk, would you please read item 6 into the record?
Thank you, Chair Sierra. Item 6 is a state legislative update for fiscal year 2021 to 2022 budget. Receive a presentation on staff legislative activities related to the fiscal year 2021 to 22 budget.
Thank you,
Thank you
Terry.
very much. And I guess we have a presentation by Sarkis Kachek and Lauren Bianchi-Clement.
Yes, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Chair Sierra and fellow directors. I am joined today by Sarkis Kachek as well as Gus Corey, SBCAG State Legislative Advocate, who is joining us by Zoom. And I will kick it off and then turn it over to the two of them. If we learned anything this past year, it's that a lot can happen in 1 year or a few months. So Governor Newsom released his May revision for the fiscal year 2021-22 budget on May 14th. The state announced a projected over $75 billion surplus that, combined with over $25 billion in federal relief, set the course for Newsom's $100 billion California comeback plan. Certainly different than what we were hearing in January looking at budget deficits. The Legislative Analyst's Office indicated that the very strong cash collections represented the largest single-year increase in over 4 decades. The governor framed the surplus as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to speed up states' recovery, invest in reserves, and address longstanding challenges for every Californian. For transportation, as we know, Senate Bill 1 competitive programs are primarily funded by the vehicle registration fee versus the general fund. So this is a very predictable, stable funding source, as opposed to the volatility of the gas tax. In the May revise, the governor proposed to provide an additional $11 billion in funding, $4.4 billion specifically from the general fund to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, create jobs, and enhance mobility in areas such as active transportation, sustainable communities, strategy, just what Mr. Becker was speaking about, implementation grants for those SESs, high-speed rail, zero-emission equipment purchases, infrastructure, and litter abatement, and more. SBCAG, along with the Central Coast Coalition and the County of Santa Barbara, signed on to a Transportation California proposal to incorporate one-time appropriations to augment existing programs that we depend upon in transportation. So this included a $1 billion request for ATP, Active Transportation Program, opposed to the governor's proposed $500 million. SBCAG also advocated for an opportunity to expedite project delivery and clear backlogs in Senate Bill 1 competitive programs, solutions for congested corridors, as well as the trade corridors enhancement program, and further emphasize our support to see funding redirected towards the active transportation program. We'll hear shortly from Sarkis about what that means for our region. But following the May revise, the State Assembly and Senate Budget Committees worked together to develop their joint budget proposal that was sent to the governor on Monday. So it's hot off the press. The legislature's budget supported the requests of the governor's May revise, but differed in a few ways. For transportation, the legislature agreed to $650 million more in additional funding from what was proposed, but held the high-speed rails advanced planning and project design component from the May revise. So a new line item included a $400 million for a state and local transportation adaptation program, which is part of the Transportation California Ask that we spoke of earlier. An additional $250 million in one-time general fund resources for a total of $750 million to support the Sustainable Community Strategies implementation. Additional specifics for what that program will look like is to be determined through follow-up legislative action. The governor has yet to sign the final budget. So while we wait the dust to settle on this unprecedented year and budget process, I want this board to know that there has been tremendous effort to leave no stone unturned to fulfill our legislative priorities. Specifically, I would like to thank and acknowledge the strong leadership of our state legislative delegation, Senator Limon, Assembly Members Bennett and Cunningham, along with Gus Corey, our state legislative advocate, and members of this board who have helped make phone calls over the last couple weeks to move our priorities and our budget augmentation requests. Despite not having an official state budget yet, we have been closely tracking a few budget items, such as the active transportation program proposals, to better understand what that could potentially mean for our region once we get the governor's signature on that budget. I would like to turn this over to Sarkis Kachek to give that update on what that program of interest will mean for our board. And then Gus Corey will speak to what we can expect and what is in play in the coming months. And with that, turn it over to Sarkis Kachek.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Chair, Directors. Good morning. So this is a really exciting time. This is what we live for in terms of getting our local agencies and our organization ready for opportunities like this. So this is why we always advocate for planning and submittal of applications for opportunities. As Lauren mentioned and is referred to in the staff report, the opportunities here are for our region are really big. First of all, for the active transportation program, we came to your board back in, I believe it was in April, when we presented what was approved by the CTC for cycle 5 of the program. They only had $450 million available for that cycle, and it's always oversubscribed and very competitive. While we had multiple agencies submit their applications, only one application was approved, and that was for City of Santa Barbara, so that was for $2 million. Our total county request was $91 million, so that just shows you how competitive the program was. So with this infusion of at least $500 million that's included in the governor's budget, that would mean that the CTC, what they do is they have scores for all the projects submitted, and then they go down the line based on available funding. So what was approved was one project. If there's another $500 million, we get to go down the list. That means 3 more projects. That means 2 more for City of Santa Barbara, and then 1 for Caltrans for their Los Alamos project. So that would yield us another $43 million out of the $500 million. So that's great news. If there happens to be an additional $500 million included in any future opportunities, that means that we'll get 4 more projects at about $39 million. So outside of 3 projects being approved for cycle 5 in our region, we would have a few projects funded and nearly $80 million in funding approved. And so we're looking forward to continuing to advocate, as Lauren mentioned, through various channels. So we're thankful for that support. And we look forward to keeping our local agencies informed of what happens next. The CTC will likely have a workshop this fall, depending on how much money is included in the cycle. So we're looking forward to that. The next program is the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. And I don't want to steal too much of Mr. Corey's thunder because he's been doing a lot of great work on this and he has more to share. But we, as you're aware, we submitted in cycle 2 of Senate Bill 1 to complete the Highway 101 HOV corridor, the last 2 segments, D and E. We submitted a request of $230 million. Under congested corridors, we requested $184 million. So we're just continuing to monitor opportunities there. I did want to just note one thing, is that while we were not recommended for funding in cycle 2, we scored very well in terms of the unfunded projects. So that's giving us optimism in terms of how opportunities could play out for congested corridors. And then under the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, while we were not approved for funding similar to congested corridors, we were ranked high in terms of our application on that program as well. So opportunities there, and we look forward to working with your board, our local agencies, as well as our state partners on identifying how we can help complete some of these priority projects in our region. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to Mr. Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Kotchak. Good morning, Chair Sierra and Directors. Gus Corey, Legislative Advocate, Corey Consulting. It's a pleasure to see you all. Look forward to sometime soon of being able to visit you in person. So I think as you heard from Ms. Bianchi Clement and Mr. Kotchak, there's a lot of exciting news coming out of Sacramento. What a difference a year makes. I think just a couple of tidbits to just underscore what was previously said. We've made a $130 billion swing. We went from a $53 billion deficit to having almost a $76 billion surplus. And so the legislature, while it had approved the budget through AB 128 on Monday to meet the constitutional deadline of getting a budget to the governor by the 15th, there's still a lot of work to be done. We still don't have the benefit of the trailer bill language, which provides the instruction and the funding for the various sectors for education, health and human services. So the bill is currently being held at the desk. And so one of two things could happen. Once they agree on trailer bill language, they may move AB 128, or it might get pulled back and amended to reflect the compromise between the big three, which is basically the governor, the assembly speaker, and the Senate president pro tem. The exciting news on transportation is that this is the first time since 2009 that transportation is receiving general fund revenues. And the investments, as Lauren had mentioned, are consistent really with the governor's climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, where there's a conscious effort to try to encourage mode shift and get people on a bus, a bike, or a train to conduct their daily activities. And so we've been successful in the past through the various competitive programs. The lane in a train concept that we had resonated mightily in Sacramento. You may recall that during the enactment of discussions prior to the enactment of SB 1, it was this body that advocated for the inclusion of the vehicle registration fee, which is a carbon neutral revenue source to fund our transportation infrastructure. And that's something that's not lost upon people here in Sacramento. And so we are looking at a prospective opportunity, I think, that Mr. Kotchak had referred to, and that is there's about $1.1 billion that has materialized in interest, which is basically what the state does is they take the general fund and any special funds and they put it into what's called the pooled money investment account. So much like you taking, say, your savings account and maybe putting it into a CD to generate even more interest, the state does the same exact thing. So that $1.1 billion does not have a statutory claim. And so in working with SBCAG staff, we devised a strategy to take a look at using a portion to further augment the active transportation program. So this would go above and beyond what the May revision and what the legislature had wanted to fund. And so what would essentially happen is if we were successful, ATP would receive about $900 million worth of funding, which should fund projects that score at least a 78 or a 79. And it's in the memo, but just to note it real quick, the City of Buellton, Santa Ynez River Trail could get funded. The Isla Vista Bike and Pedestrian Improvement Project could get funded. Milpas Street in Santa Barbara and the City of Santa Maria with the active Santa Maria Safe Routes to School Corridor Improvement project. Those are all the four projects that Mr. Kotchak was referring to that could get funded. But the real centerpiece of our effort is to try to take advantage of this really free opportunity and to leave no stone unturned to try to complete the 101 multi-corridor project. And so the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, we were the top project that did not receive funding, and that wasn't due to merit. It was just due to the lack of resources because Cycle 2 had half the money available in Cycle 1. And so there's $400 million dedicated for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, which would mean that 4D&E would get funded, as well as a project in San Luis Obispo, one of two projects in Orange County and one in Santa Clara County. And then the remainder of the balance of the funds, there's $300 million that would go to the SHOP program for continued maintenance and rehabilitation on the state highway system. So I really I really just want to thank Senator Lamone in particular for taking the lead on this effort, and really our whole legislative delegation. But Senator Lamone had agreed to circulate a letter, which was signed by our delegation, including Assembly members Bennett and Cunningham, and some other Assembly members from Riverside County and the San Joaquin Valley, because there's something in this proposal for everybody statewide. So for our county to possibly acquire a total of an additional $83 million worth of ATP projects seems like that's a pretty sweet deal, in addition to trying to finish off the 101 project. So the legislature is still amongst the big three having conversations on the budget. Conversations are very fluid. They go on recess by July 16th. The governor, however, must sign a budget by July 1st, and they can continue to work on trailer bills as late as August or September. So they go on break the 16th of July through the 16th of August, and then they adjourn regular session on September 10th. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. We're cautiously optimistic, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of people trying to spend down what's really a generational opportunity. The surplus, in fact, the $76 billion, just to give additional context, is about how much the general fund was a decade ago. So the entirety of the general fund was a decade ago. So this is a really unprecedented opportunity. We look forward to taking advantage. And I do want to thank board members and staff for their contribution in helping our advocacy in Sacramento. So I'll stop right there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for some really good news, Gus, Lauren, and Sarkis, and our elected representatives. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, this is Director Hart.
Director Hart, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Corey. He is too modest, as usual. I don't think the weight of what has been said is fully captured by the words. You know, what Mr. Corey did, because he's in Sacramento all the time and he's representing our interests and constantly thinking about ways to advance opportunities for the 101, is, you know, he's really the author of this idea that will take this $1.1 billion in interest that's accruing in transportation counts and allocate that, you know, in a different way than the administration had originally proposed. The administration was proposing that all that money go to Caltrans for SHOP projects, and that's a worthy, understandable public policy objective. But I think what Mr. Corey recognized is that, you know, there is a lot of interest in active transportation projects around the whole state of California, and that there are a lot of legislators representing virtually every district in the state who would be very interested in a plan that would take some of that money and aim it at active transportation projects. So that naturally brings a lot of legislative support to this idea. And then the genius of it is, by increasing the funding for the congested corridors, that puts us in a unique opportunity to advance the 101 project. And there's no other vehicle that's out there that would have happened, you know, with the administration's process and the regular legislative process to achieve this result. And it's not a certainty, as Mr. Corey mentioned. You know, there's a lot of work to be done. There are competing interests statewide, and we're going to have to be diligent and persistent. But when Mr. Corey explained this plan to me, I immediately called Senator Monique Lamone, and she got it instantly and became a huge champion for this effort, and has organized her office and has been 100% committed to it. As Gus mentioned, she circulated a letter. Assemblymember Bennett and Assemblymember Cunningham both signed on to that. Other legislators have signed on to that. I had conversations with Assemblymember Bennett about this, and he was equally enthusiastic, understanding how regionally critical the 101 funding is and how unique an opportunity this is to fund that project. So all three of our state legislators, but Monique and Steve Bennett in particular, as Assemblymember Cunningham as well, have really, done the heavy lift to get traction on this idea. My understanding is the governor's office now has also recognized this opportunity and is coming along. The California Transportation Commission too. So, the big aircraft carrier that is state government is moving in our direction. And this wouldn't have happened without Gus. Has to be said out loud. This is not the first time this has happened. When SB1 was foundering in the legislature because there wasn't a consensus about the mechanisms to use to create funding, it was Gus's idea to go to vehicle registration fees, which turned out to be genius as well. This is a carbon neutral revenue source that is not dependent on VMT, that is going to be the backbone of transportation funding, and it was Gus's idea to push that through. We are punching so far above our weight as a result of Mr. Corey's representation in Sacramento. It is amazing. And then, we got to recognize too, the lane in the train, the delivering of the commuter train that we got was also because Gus was in the room with Senator Jackson and Brian Kelly and forging a deal on the high-speed rail vote that Senator Jackson cast and used her leverage at that moment to get the attention of the administration to get us the commuter train. So we cannot say thank you enough. When we get this project done, we ought to name it the Gus Corey Memorial Highway or something. But again, the teamwork involved, our state legislators, recognizing how important this is to the community. This is a 20-year goal. This is the highest regional transportation priority for Santa Barbara County region, SBCAG. In particular, Senator Lamone, Assemblymember Bennett, and Assemblymember Cunningham, having our back and taking their influence and working with their colleagues and expanding the coalition of supporters is really impressive work. And all of us, need to step in too and help that along and lend our weight and urge them to continue to get other supporters on board for this idea, because it's not done yet, but it's got a lot of momentum.
Thank you very much, Director Hart. Gus, I see your hand is up. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to, I very much appreciate the kind words by Director Hart. I do want to acknowledge that none of this would be possible without Director Kern's confidence also, and working collaboratively with the SBCAG team. It's a really humbling experience. It's a really exciting experience, and no promises. The governor's office, while they do not have an official position on what we're trying to attempt, they said that they could consider it within the context of striking a deal to get the appropriation on the balance of the funding for the high-speed rail project, the $4.2 billion that they're looking for there. So this is why we thought of this, is there's something in it for everybody to add to the pot here so that they could deliver on things for their district. And so just very much appreciate the opportunity to represent SBCAG, and fingers crossed, no promises, but fingers crossed, and we'll keep you posted.
So Gus, do you recommend the board members here bombarding the governor's office in the next week?
I might have to go into hiding if you do that, but.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board before I go to the public? I don't see any. So Terry, do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Sierra, we received no request to speak public comment.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to bring it back to the board one more time for any closing discussion. And I don't see anybody. All righty. Well, this was a presentation only, so no action is required, but oh my gosh, what potentially wonderful news. And thank you all very, very much for all the effort that's been put into this. Really appreciate it. And it's nice to see you, Gus. Okay. Then we move on to item number 7. Would you please read that into the record?
Thank you, Chair Sierra. Item 7 is the Highway 166 Black Road Project. 7A, receive an update on the status of the Highway 166 Black Road Project. 7B, approve and authorize the executive director to waive the competitive bidding requirement and to execute an agreement to procure traffic poles, signals, lighting equipment, device components, parts, and supplies for the Highway 166 Black Road Project on an as-needed basis effective through 12/31/2022 with a maximum aggregate amount limit not to exceed $100,000 upon review and approval by legal counsel. 7C, authorize the executive director to advertise and receive bids for construction of the Highway 166 Black Road Project. And finally, 7D, after considering the initial study with mitigated negative declaration, SCH number 2018101004, adopted by the California Department of Transportation on October 31st, 2018, find that no subsequent environmental review document shall be prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, section 15162, related to the State Route 166 Black Road Intersection Improvement Project, District 5, SB 166 project. Since there are no substantial changes proposed in the project and no substantial changes have occurred with respect to the circumstances under which the project is undertaken that will require major revisions to the IS/MND due to new or substantially increased significant impacts, and there is no new information of substantial importance showing new or substantially increased, oh my gosh, I got lost, sorry, measures or alternatives that would substantially reduce significant impacts. That's it.
Very good job. Thank you very, very much. And I believe we have a presentation by Mr. Luna.
Yes, thank you, Chair Sierra and directors. And so just good to see you this morning. Just to boil it down real quick is that all those recommendations mean that we're getting close to construction. So we're excited about moving this project forward. I'm going to do a brief outline of where we're at on the project and then talk you through the recommendations and as to what they mean. And so let's go ahead and move forward. I'm going to be referring to the staff report. I do not have any slides, so I'm just going to be giving a verbal report today. The Highway 166 Black Road Project, as I mentioned, is nearing construction. You've had several items presented to the board in recent months about right-of-way purchases and design advancements, and we've given a staff report as to the progress that we're making. Currently, the design or the contract design that SBCAG has undertaken through a consulting contract with SOMAS is nearing 100% complete. We've actually submitted that to Caltrans to receive encroachment permits. So that is good. We're still working through some of the utility relocation issues and working with our partners, both at Caltrans and the County of Santa Barbara, to get that completed. Also, this board has approved right-of-way purchase agreements, and so those are being finalized to date. And I did get confirmation that, and on the agenda today as a consent item was to have the executive director sign certifications of acceptance. So that's kind of the next step related to the property that's acquired for this project. So on the agenda today is 3 recommendations, and I'm going to take these in parts. I'll start with the one related to the California Environmental Quality Act. So SBCAG was the implementing agency during the CEQA, and Caltrans is the lead agency. So that requires that SBCAG, this board, make findings as to the adequacy of the environmental document. And basically the finding that this board is making, as it's outlined in the recommendation, is that there have been no new changes in the development of the project as it was described in the original environmental document that was circulated. And so, as it says, there are no substantial changes proposed to the project, and no substantial changes have occurred that would change any of the proposed mitigations. So your board would be making a finding to allow us to move forward into construction to allow to make that finding. The middle recommendation is to authorize the executive director to approve or to advertise the project for construction. So that, as you know, is kind of the project to competitively bid the project going forward through the public bidding process. This would allow the team to finish up the contract documents and then have those approved and authorized by Executive Director Kern, and then we would publicly bid the project for those contract items. And then the last item was the first one on the list is to seek a waiver for some of the components that are typically or would be included in the contract bid list, specifically related to traffic signal poles and equipment that is needed for the operations and signals that are going to be the central point of this project to manage the, to improve both the traffic operation and the signal at this currently stop controlled intersection. So on the second page of the staff report, staff has kind of outlined the justification for making that determination and waiver. There currently is long lead time items for procuring traffic signal poles. And if we waited and included those in the contract bid items, we would have to wait until an award is made later this fall. But if the waiver is approved by this board, we can work with Caltrans and our design team to advance that work and then have those poles procured separately and then stored temporarily. And we would include in the contract documents instructions as to where the contractor could retrieve those materials and then utilize them for the project to avoid any delays on the project. So this is in alignment with SBCAG's adopted purchasing policy, and we've made the reference in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luna. Do we have any questions on this item? I don't see any hands raised. I'm looking. Nothing. Okay, then I'm going to open it up to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Chair Sierra, we have no requests for public comment.
All righty. Any discussion by the board, or do I have a motion for A, B, C, and D?
So moved, Julian.
Thank you.
Second, Patino.
All righty. Roll call.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Eurig?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
Osborne?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
And Chair Sierra.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for your work, Fred. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 8 into?
Item 8, Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee. Receive a presentation and provide direction on the selection process to fill a vacancy of an at-large member position on the Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee and 5 terms expiring September 2021.
All righty. And we have a presentation by Lauren Bianchi-Clement.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Sierra and fellow directors. The item before you is to seek your direction, as Terry mentioned, to proceed with a process to fill a vacant at-large member position. Add the reappointment of Jeffrey Slaff, who is an at-large member, to the consent agenda for the July Board of Directors meeting, and consider the terms expiring for the North and South County member seats. So the Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee serves as an advisory capacity to the SBCAG Board of Directors. The ordinance, the Measure A ordinance, requires the appointment of an 11-member committee by the SBCAG Board of Directors. 4 members are nominated by the North County Subregional Committee, 4 members are nominated by the South Coast Subregional Committee, and 3 are serve as at-large members appointed by the board. Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee member terms are 4 years in accordance with the bylaws. The initial terms were staggered by 2 years so that the committee membership turnover was spaced out. There are 6 members whose terms expire September 2021. 2 members whose terms are expiring serve in at-large positions. One of them, Jeffrey Slaff, was appointed in August 2020 to serve the remaining year of a 4-year term, and he is eligible for reappointment at the direction of the board. Mr. Slaff has expressed interest in continuing to serve. Therefore, SBCAG staff is recommending that the board provide direction to add his reappointment to the consent agenda for the July meeting. Christy Nordgren is also an at-large member and is not eligible for reappointment per the ordinance following her election to the Bealton Union High School Board or School Board, and thus creating a vacancy. SBCAG's process to fill at-large vacancy positions has been to broadly advertise the vacancy, solicit applications, and form an ad hoc committee made up of the SBCAG chair and the 2 sub-regional committee chairs to meet once to review the applications and to nominate a candidate to the board for appointment on the committee. A similar process has been employed for vacancies on the North and South County members of the committee. So should the board elect to continue with the process to fill the at-large vacancy, we are recommending that we assess the interest of reappointment of the North and South County members whose terms are expiring prior to beginning a countywide recruitment to ensure that there's a large enough pool of eligible applicants for all potential vacancies. And following the assessment, we will provide an update at the North and South County subregionals next month in July. And so before I conclude, I would like to express our tremendous appreciation for all our committee members. Their service is voluntary, requires the personal time and commitment of all of them, and their partnership with our agency to serve as community ambassadors is invaluable. So with that, I would like to, get direction from the board.
All righty. Thank you very much, Lauren. Do we have any questions of staff? I don't see any hands up. Okay, any public comment?
Chair Sierra, we have no public comment.
Okay, then I'm closing public comment and bringing it back for board discussion.
So the recommendation is to bring back for consent calendar Jeff's appointment.
That's one of them.
And to open up the appointment for the other seat.
Correct.
In recruitment. I would move that we direct that.
Great.
Second?
So the motion was to what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it up here.
To bring back Jeff Slaff's reappointment at the next agenda and to open up the recruitment for the open seat.
Following the assessment of North and South.
That's right.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I noticed that we've got at the 3 at-large members, 2 are South County, and Christy Nordgren was the only North County. So we'll open it up to everybody, but that should be considered. Huh? Director Nelson, please.
Yeah, just seeing that we have additional terms expiring on North and South, and so I assume that those will be coming back as well.
Yeah, so the process for that right now is we'll be conducting an assessment. We have a number of those members who have expressed interest in being reappointed. So that will be going to the North and South County subregionals next month because the ordinance is very specific for the North County members, and the South County members have to go through that nomination process there. So we won't start this broad countywide recruitment effort until we have that done through the subregionals, if that makes sense.
Perfect, thank you.
Terrific. Okay, so we've had a motion and a second. Terry?
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Eurig?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
Osborne?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Mario?
Aye.
And Chair Sierra.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Thank you very much. Oh, now we come to my favorite part, my 1-minute reports. Who's going to raise their hand and tell us something exciting about their community? Come on. I'm looking. Nobody? Nobody has a 1-minute report?
Chair Sierra.
Charlie.
Director Perotti.
Director Perotti, and then we'll have Director Urig. Thank you very much. Please
Okay.
tell us.
Thank you. Well, I am going to be brief. We're going to respect our time here. I just want to say that we just finished our 2-year budget after 7 months of working on it. We had so many workshops from every department, and it really did help us make our decision. So the budget is done for 2 years. And we just had an Energy and Green Issues Committee recently where Kent Epperson came in and made a presentation on Cyclemania. And we had a pop-up demo of electric bikes. We hosted that at City Hall, and it was quite successful. Also, we just finished putting together a community bike survey, which will go out to the public. It's something that we've been very interested in for a very long time is bike share. So that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Urig?
Thank you, Chair Sierra. Right off some of the most exciting things is that we're going to be able to start having some special events. I think most every city here is looking forward to having some of those. We had some recruitment for a city clerk position, we had some obviously terminations back a little over a year ago. We're looking to fill, and one of them key for us in our city was a city clerk. So that position was let out, and they're in the process of going through some of the people that applied for that position, and we'll hopefully have someone shortly. We also reached out to some of the people that had been terminated from recreation and maintenance, and were able to get 2 of the 3 positions back from previous employees. And so we're excited about that. This Friday will be our first Movies in the Park in Solvang Park, beginning at 7:30. I will be there along with our Jenny from our recreation department, showing the crudes. So if anybody's out and about up in Solvang Way, it'll be a great time. We also have popcorn and hot chocolate for everyone. And next Wednesday, we will be starting our Music in the Park, and that will be going through the summer. It's from 5 to 8 every Wednesday night in conjunction with our farmers market on at Solvang Park, right there in the gazebo. And I'm blessed to be able to be the first band to get to play with a couple of different bands. I've been in a number of them, so I have 2 different bands that will be opening up, and that should be fun. And we're looking forward again to having the July 4th parade. My understanding, we're also going to be holding that. It'll be a little bit modified version, but other than that, July 4th, it should be 11 p.m. downtown Solvang. That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Director Patino.
Yes, thank you, Director Sierra. Commencing July 1st, SMAT will begin the process of restoring our normal fixed route weekday and weekend service with a 2-tiered ramp-up approach. Our service levels will be right-sized to ridership demands and to maintain safety and efficiency. And so we haven't been collecting at the fare box at this time. So that will resume July 1. And then we've also, on July 1, 2021, the Santa Maria City Council meeting, we approved an MOU with Hancock College for the SMAT Hancock Bus Pass program. And so the MOU was developed jointly between the transit staff and Hancock so that the students could ride free with the SMAT on the fixed route transit system. So and our swimming pool is open. We're so happy to be open in Santa Maria. And the rodeo will be a little bit it'll be a little different, but it'll be happening in September. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
Sure. We just passed the county budget, which was a bear. And I was just holding back to see if my colleagues wanted to talk about anything about it. But one of the things that we approved is funds for, typically we have a process for safe route to school projects, but there are sometimes meritorious projects that, are B pluses instead of straight A's. They're still needed to increase mobility. They're still worthwhile, but maybe there's not as much accident data to reinforce their application. And so these funds would be usable in each district to do, there may be enough for one project in each district. So modest, but an important precedent to try to do more of these kinds of mobility projects. And then, of course, we designated quite a bit of money for open space acquisitions, trail acquisitions in both North and South County.
And this is Director Hartman. I have one too.
Okay.
Sunday a week ago, Ken Epperson brought up his electric bikes to Sunstone Winery to celebrate the first wine-friendly business on the Refugio Wine Trail. There's a fix-it station at Sunstone. It's really nice. And this was made possible by Sunstone and the Chumash. They're going to open another fix-it station at their gas station on 246 and possibly also at the Y. And John Park is someone who's also worked. So this is first place in our wine trail in San Ynez Valley. And if you've never ridden out South Refugio Road, it is spectacular.
And a lot easier on an electric bike. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't see anybody else, so I will move on to the Executive Director's Report. Margie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson and members of the board. A few kudos that I want to share with you today. First of all, I want to thank Scott Spalding, our Regional Rail and Transit Director, on getting the regional transit facility to the finish line. We are now the proud property owners of this piece, and it took over 6 months, and his tenacity and diligence was essential. And I also want to thank the City of Goleta staff for helping us get over the finish line as well, because they helped us facilitate the required approvals, and everything worked out perfectly until the very end, and I had to rush up to Buellton to get a signature from our chair, Holly Sierra, at the last minute to get close of escrow. But it all worked out in the end, so thank you all for your diligence on that issue. And I also want to piggyback on the kudos that Director Hart talked about with Gus Corey. I want to thank Gus Corey and his tenacity and diligence. I mean, this is just such an incredible time at the state capitol. We've never had this excitement and these types of last minute negotiations. And it's so nice to have Gus Corey on the front lines helping us with Lauren Bianchi-Clement and Sarkis Kachak. We've been having phone calls at, last minute at 4:30 or 5:30 at night, just trying to coordinate our messages and making sure that we're all on the same page. And so hopefully these state legislative efforts and discussions happening real time and the changes happening real time, that this effort will possibly have a great opportunity for SBCAG and our regional priorities. So we're all hopeful and crossing our fingers, but it takes that much effort to get us there. I'd also like to recognize and congratulate Terry Parsons on her retirement from Caltrans District 5. Terry has been a great partner for SBCAG and our local agencies and stakeholders in their role at Caltrans. She's been instrumental in coordinating planning and delivery of critical projects that have helped improve the quality of life for our residents in our region and District 5 and throughout California. And we wish her the very best in her next chapter of life. And then on another little sad note, Dylan Tonningson has submitted his resignation to SBCAG. He has a new job in the Bay Area, which is where his family is from. So he'll be leaving SBCAG at the beginning of July. We are very sad to see him go. He's been with SBCAG over 2 years and has been a great member of our team. But we wish him best of luck in his future endeavors, and we hope to see his career soar from here. So with that, that's my report, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Caltrans, your last report.
Director Hartman had a follow-up with, may I
go forward?
Okay, certainly.
Yes, yes. This is with the director's report. A number of SBCAG directors, including Director Nelson, are working on improving broadband access and addressing the digital divide. We spoke about it briefly at an earlier meeting. Both the state and federal governments have identified this as a huge priority. And yesterday, Congressman Carvajal's staff told us that, and Director Kern, that there's a database they provided of over 80 federal funding programs that could be used for broadband purposes. We have a number of organizations working in the county, some of them collaboratively, some sort of on their own. But I would like to propose that given the timely opportunity about these grants, that we would, as a board, ask Director Kern to have SBCAG convene a public forum where we can invite various subject matter experts, some of the organizations that have been working in this space, so that we can identify what we have, what the gaps and opportunities are, and that would then maximize our opportunity to seek some funding and really address the digital divide. So I think she would need some direction from our board to do this as a public forum, but that all the directors would attend, I hope, because it really is cross-jurisdictional. It is the kind of infrastructure that at some point it may be appropriate for SBCAG to pursue.
Chair Sierra, this is Director Perotti. I don't know.
Director Perotti.
I don't know if
Go
you
ahead.
need a second on that, but I definitely would support that idea.
It's not an agenda item, so we can't vote on it, but.
Can we give general direction, or?
We can. I think that it's something that the board, the directors would like to see. So perhaps at another meeting. Director Nelson, your hand is up.
Let's ask Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sierra, and thank you, Director Hartman. I just wanted to add my encouragement of SBCAG. It makes so much sense. You know, SBCAG has been a convener of many regional projects lately. Obviously, what we've been doing with transportation has been a big deal. We've seen the nexus with SBCAG staff and convening with the census. We're seeing what they're doing with some of the trail work countywide. And it makes a whole lot of sense with broadband. Is, you know, broadband, as we talked about with the 2050 plan that we're looking at, you know, that's going to be an important part of allowing telecommuting and maybe solving some of our transportation issues. And so making sure that high-speed broadband is available to all of our communities. It's also going to be important for education, as some of our constituents aren't able to travel or afford to go to colleges and other places. Online education continues to be an affordable option for a lot of our local citizens here. And I really wanted to see this continue to move forward. And I like just to add my voice of encouragement for something in the future. And again, thank you, Director Hartman, for bringing it up.
Thank you. Susan Mckenzie, how do we go about handling this?
Madam Chair, this is Rachel Van Mullum. I already have my mic on, so I'll go ahead and go this time.
Okay, thank you.
So since it's not an agenda item, I'd recommend that the board not take any action. You have a couple of choices. You could direct Director Kern to come back at a future meeting and have a discussion and take a vote. Another option would be Director Kern has authority on her own to go ahead and do open forums. So I think it's just really up to the board. Do you want to have a discussion about that at the next meeting? And if so, I would just direct Director Kern to add it to the July agenda.
I think that would be best. Director Kern, could you add that to a agenda coming up in the very soon future?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Hartman, for bringing up this subject. Okay, moving on to Terry Person's last Caltrans report for us.
Thank you. I just want to confirm with Terry that she can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair Sierra and directors. And as Margie mentioned, today is my last board meeting and I will be retiring as of June 30th. I'm joining my husband who retired last June. So I'm getting on board with that plan. And I'd also like to thank all the staff at SBCAG and the directors, and especially all the local agency staff that I've worked with over the past few years. Everyone is so dedicated to what they do, and we really have accomplished a lot. And especially in the last year, it's pretty amazing what we've been able to accomplish. So on that note, I know we have a lot going on right now. So I have a few statewide things I wanted to touch base on, and about 6 items that are local. I'm going to go through those as quickly as possible. I do want to thank Fred Luna, especially for the work on the 166 Black Road project that he talks about, and how that's moving along, and looking forward to that going to construction soon. So statewide, we have a few items I want to report out on. This was touched briefly in the discussion on the state budget, which is the Clean California effort. And this is a $1.5 billion proposal to address litter and community engagement throughout the road system in California. So this is both the state highway system, and also a third of that funding is going to be supporting cities and counties, tribal communities, and also transit agencies to help clean up local streets and public spaces. So we'll have more details on that after the budget is approved. And next, I wanted to let everyone know that the Office of Planning and Research is having a public workshop on the California's adaptation strategy. And this is looking at the potential impacts of climate change, including wildfire and heat, drought, flooding, as well as sea level rise. The final in a series of virtual workshops is actually focused on the Central Coast. That's going to be taking place from 4 to 6 p.m. on Monday, June 28th. And people can register online at the Office of Planning and Research website, opr.ca.gov. And last statewide thing I wanted to mention is the sustainable planning grants are supposed to be announced next week, which grants are being awarded. So you'll hopefully we'll hear about that in the next week. As far as focusing in on Santa Barbara County, there's a number of projects going on. We have in construction in our district, our 5-county district, we have over $400 million in projects that are in construction right now. So it's been a very busy year, both with construction and new projects that have been moving forward. And it's pretty amazing with all the local agencies, the regional agencies, what we've been able to accomplish to move all those projects along. So as we know, May 24th was the kickoff of construction for the Padaro segment of the 101 project from Carpinteria to Santa Barbara. So that's underway. And I have very good news for Buellton. Buellton will be glad to hear that overnight closures of 101 through Buellton are going to end this week. So no more detours onto the local roads. We've had some concerns from the residents about noise and traffic resulting from that. So that will come to an end with that phase of the project, but the work on the roadway will continue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. For the Alamo Pentaton pedestrian bridge in Los Olivos, we're in the design phase on that project. And we are going to be sharing some of the conceptual bridge rail designs with the community, and also some of the interpretive display concepts for the new bridge. There's going to be a community workshop for that, and we're still working out the date, and we're coordinating with staff at Supervisor Hartman's office on who to include in that, all the different community organizations. So looking forward to that. And then some of you may know the Gaviota Rest area is closed for major repairs, and that's going to be through February of 2022. And that includes upgrading the wastewater and electrical system, adding in a new tank and a pump house, and a new crew building. And another project in the Gaviota Pass area that we're going to be doing coming in the summer is a wildlife study through the Gaviota Pass corridor. And the scope is still being developed, but the goal is to identify some potential enhancements to provide safe passage of wildlife through the corridor. And in fact, recently there have been a few animals have been hit along that corridor. So some of you may be aware of that. And finally, the last project I'm going to report out on is a pavement project that's underway right now, and that's between Vandenberg and Guadalupe. And this is pavement repairs and resurfacing, and also installation of rumble strips and some lighting at Black Road. So that concludes my update, and I can address any questions anyone has. And again, I'd like to thank everyone. I've really enjoyed my time working with Caltrans in District 5, and especially working with all the communities in Santa Barbara County and the great team at SBCAG. And because there's a lot of stuff we really worked together hard on, especially all of our funding efforts in the last couple of years to move projects along, and so many new opportunities around funding that we really had to step up and work and really collaborate together on to get that funding so we can move forward with so many critical projects in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Director Patino?
Yes, I have a question, and I hope you can answer this. It's you said the Gaviota rest area was closed. There was a letter to the editor in the Santa Maria Times, and it's very, very brief. It says, until recently, plotting a trip to our favorite coast community, Morro Bay from Lemoore, started with a last-minute at-home bathroom stop. Now we plan to hold our water until the Caltrans rest area, clearly marked on SR State Route 41, and about halfway between Shalam and Shandon, when the state sign promising relief for aching bladders will appear. Then come the hooray cries from those who know Morro Bay without a rest area is no closer than the other side of the moon. They know in plotting that route to prepare for a drier, longer trip. Finally, the rest area ahead sign appears, and with those with a greater need and sharp, sadly, moan, oh no, the area is closed. And I went up to Red Bluff last month, and I can't remember where else, and all these rest areas are closed. And even earlier than that, a lot of times when you're traveling, and especially with the COVID, there was no place for people to use any of these facilities. And so I've noticed it before. It seems like they're all done at one time, leaving nothing there. And my question is why?
So it sounds like we just need two things: better coordination with rest areas that we're closing along an extensive corridor. And then it seems like earlier signage that the rest areas are closed. So if there's a gas station or another facility where people could stop, they would need that. I don't have a specific answer as to why we're doing so many of them at the same time. I'm just kind of familiar with the ones that are in our district. I do know in other parts of the state, I've also noticed that there are a number of the rest areas that are under construction. So I think
maybe
back,
whoever the guy is in that little cubicle that decides all these rest areas are going to be closed at the same time for whatever reason, they need to probably coordinate those. Thank you. And
Okay.
Terry, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We'll have to get our rest area and our maintenance people all together and figure out who gets to close which ones when.
Thank you.
whether we need some porta potties coming in there. Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Chair Sierra, I see you're talking, but I didn't hear you.
Thank you very much. I do not see any other hands waved or anything. I think we all wish you a very, very happy retirement. And thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Item 12 is communications, and there is no report. And at this point, I am adjourning our meeting. We'll see you all next Thursday, July 15th at 10 a.m. And have a nice month. Meeting's adjourned.
Bye.
Director Nelson. Lavanino. Sierra.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Julian. Osborne.
Here.
Murillo.
Here.
Patino.
Here.
Infante.
Here.
Williams. Hart. Hartman.
Here.
And Chair Perotti.
Here.
Thank you. Thank
Wrong
you.
button, sorry. I was muted. Okay, will the clerk please read the housekeeping instructions for the participants on Zoom?
Certainly. A couple of Zoom reminders for participants. For all panelists, this includes all APCD board members, please remember to mute your mic when not speaking. If you would like to comment, use the raised hand button. To do this, click on the participant icon at the bottom of your screen. The panelist sidebar will appear, and at the bottom right of that sidebar, click on the ellipses icon, and from there, the raised hand button should become available. If you are an attendee, this includes APCD staff and all members of the public, including those participating via telephone. You will be on listen-only mode. All attendees will remain on listen-only unless unmuted by the board clerk to provide public comment. Comments from the public are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The public will not be able to share their video or screen even if unmuted. When public comment is called on for an agenda item, attendees may use the raised hand button at the bottom of the screen to express desire to provide public comment for that item. You will be unmuted when it is your turn. Those participating via telephone can raise their hand by dialing *9. Thank you, and that's the conclusion of the Zoom reminders.
Thank you. If you all stand and please join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next item of business is our closed session, and will the clerk please read the item into the record?
Item C, closed session. C1, conference with real property negotiators, Government Code Section 54956.8, property assessors parcel number 111270050, address 1011 West McCoy Lane, Santa Maria, California 93455. Agency negotiator, Air Pollution Control Officer Aaron Arlen Janae, and Susan Freeborn, Real Property Agent 2, County of Santa Barbara. Negotiating party, Gina Gluyas, Better Home and Garden Real Estate Haven Properties. Under negotiation, price and terms.
Okay, thank you. We will now adjourn to closed session.
Thank you. And at this point, all board members participating via Zoom, please log out of the Zoom call and dial into the closed session conference call number provided. Once closed session concludes, please log back onto Zoom. Thank you.